We good? We are ready. All right. Ready. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Bruce Williams, Chief Media Officer for Dentsu. I also have the great privilege these days to serve as our interim CEO of our Dentsu X brand, where one of our amazing clients is Doug Zarkin, who's the CMO of Take 5. Doug is also is it fair to say, award-winning author?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll say it. All right. So award-winning author of Thinking Human, How to Build Brand Love in the Era of AI. So an absolute expert today on this topic that we're just really excited to talk about here. And I think for us at Dentsu, this is one that we're really excited to talk about just because we talk a lot about the era that we are currently working in is the algorithmic era. This is this period of time where we've gone from really overall broadcast advertising to precision marketing, and now we're this algorithmic era. And so the whole notion of like, how do we take advantage of this? How do we capitalize? How do we manage against the risk of everything that I'm sure we've all been talking about around here the last few days, flattening brands? How do we avoid sea of sameness? I think that word's coming back. Yep. And so for us, it's just a really exciting topic. How do we make sure that the brand itself is resonating? We're building brands in this era that we're operating in. So again, really excited to have Doug here as a true authority on the topic. So I'm going to kick us off, Doug, with the word brand love, somewhat like sea of sameness as a topic and a word that's been around a little while. Would love for you just to talk a little bit about brand love and how does you see it evolving in this era of AI?
Yeah, so if you ascribe to the premise that it is no longer acceptable, it is no longer healthy, it is no longer good, it is no longer sustainable to just be friends with your consumer, then you can start to understand the fact that brand love really is based out of an XY axis, passion and trust. The more passionate your consumer is about your brand, the more they trust your brand. The more recession-proof your brand becomes, the more competitive-proof your brand becomes, and actually the easier it becomes to start setting forecasts. You know your brand is in what I like to call the friend zone. Do you guys know what the friend zone is from dating? You go on a date, I remember when I was single a long time ago, there may have been somebody that I had feelings for that didn't have them for me, and you go in, make that move, that declaration, and they kind of give you the emotional equivalent of the Heisman. And that's what happens when you start looking at your brand forecast and you realize that your existing customers aren't coming back. They like you, but they don't love you. And so the whole notion of creating brand love and moving your brand out of the friend zone is really predicated on believing that brand love is fueled by the two simple notions of passion and trust.
Yeah, that's great. So I love the idea of just everything, just like you're thinking about, like, how are you bringing them in? If I connect that back to this era that we're operating in, like we're now in a place where it's not as simple. It's not as much control for you as the brand. So operating in the era of AI, algorithmic era, how are you seeing, perhaps the opportunity for brands to adapt in this time and really push forward?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many declarative silly statements about the impact that AI is going to have on marketers. Let's review them really quickly. AI is going to eliminate marketers. That's somewhere stuck in the intersection of dumb and stupid. AI can do the marketer's job. That's also somewhere stuck in the notion of dumb and stupid. AI makes you better. Honestly, I think that also is somewhere stuck in the notion of dumb and stupid, because all AI is data. And data for the average marketer doesn't make decisions. Data for the modern marketer is used to help you make decisions, but it's all predicated on the questions that you ask. Even if you take something as simple as ChatGPT, the effectiveness of ChatGPT is in the queries and the prompts. My ChatGPT is really well trained. I've been feeding it everything from my book to emails to points of view. It's kept me out of HR prison a couple times, which I love. But what it also does is it helps me frame things in a way that maybe can get the point across more eloquently, more politically correct, or even more strategic than me just kind of intellectually vomiting on the computer, which is kind of what email is. And so I think AI in general is a tool in the modern day marketer's toolbox, but like anything, you've got to use those tools for good and not for evil.
HR prison is a topic we'll dig into later.
HR prisons, if I was going to write another book, it would be, here's the email that I wanted to send, and then here's the email that what it looked like after I put it into ChatGPT.
It's not too late for that book. We could take a look at that one. All right, so obviously everything with AI feels the exact opposite of one of the premises that you have talked a lot about and also wrote about as far as thinking human.
Yeah.
And so when we think about that, how do you think about, that all works hand in hand with the idea of like unlocking brain love?
So thinking human is a concept that I'm really passionate about. It's something I talk in the book about, and it's really the notion of this. Imagine we all have friends in our life. Imagine if every friend treated you as if you were their best friend. Let's think about that for a second. What would happen if every friend in your virtual Rolodex you called and reacted to you as if you were their best friend? Now let's take the business equivalent. Imagine if every customer that came to your website, that walked in your door, that called your call center, you treated as if it was the only customer that was going to visit your place of business that day. What would your operations playbook look like? How would you handle a customer service issue? What would you do pre and post purchase? What would the purchase experience be? That's the entire premise of thinking human, treating every customer as if they're the only customer. Where AI can become really helpful is in the efficiencies of looking at different approaches to test. You can put a service script into AI and give it a couple really good prompts and spit out 3 or 4 different iterations to help you refine what you may be missing, because trust, the notion of trust, really powerful word, probably the most misunderstood word in business, is really about those small moments of care and connection. Deals and discounts don't earn trust, they garner favor. Trust is really in the small moments. Love in our personal lives is not in the grand gestures, it's in the small moments. And so for me, what I use AI for is an opportunity to make me even better by putting options in front of me that I didn't even think existed.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because, I think that one of the things we've talked about in relation to AI just as an industry and group is like, how do we manage some of the change elements of that? Mm-hmm. And you're talking about a lot of it is like, how are you putting some of these, whether it's tools, whether it's building mastery, like whether it's just like, how are you taking data and how are you putting that into the business? What would you likely guide people on? One of the things that I happen to know you're passionate about is ripping things to the studs to rebuild. And so like, is there something that you would guide people on as far as how they can think about implementing and driving this type of change?
I mean, I would say, first thing is if anybody has the phrase AI expert on their LinkedIn, you probably should remove it because none of us are AI experts. It's brand freaking new. It's a shiny toy. We're all trying to figure out how to use it. Most of us are using it for good. Some of us are using it for evil. I'm actually not a big fan of taking things down to the studs unless they're needed. But I am a big fan of, is the answer to complexity always lies in simplicity. What is the purpose of marketing? It's a question I've asked it when I've taught at Harvard. I've asked it when I've taught at Roslyn High School. And it's interesting, you get diatribes as answering that question. What is the purpose of marketing? It's really simple. Purpose of marketing is to motivate the consumer to take the action we want them to take when we want them to take it. Full stop. How you accomplish that, incredibly complex. There is no right way, there is no wrong way, there's just a way. I like getting back to the fundamentals. If I stood on the street corner at Times Square handing out $50 bills, I probably could get a lot of people to do what I want them to do when I want them to do it. Why then is my programmatic display campaign not effective? Because that's supposed to give me the optimizations to make it even easier. And in reality, in many cases, it makes it even harder because we've infused so much complexity, so much algorithmic learning into the model and kind of lost our humanity of what are we trying to accomplish? I'm trying to get person A, B, and C to take action D.
The $50 bill thing, I'm noticing a pattern. You put money underneath everybody's chair, and you're giving away $50 bills. So there's a play here. I'm picking up on it. So with some of that, I think that part of what I think you're challenging people on a little bit is AI might drive to simplicity. And in that, there's also a notion of everybody chasing short-term wins. Curious, how you're thinking about that at that intersection of chasing short-term wins, going back to brand love, where you talk about the relationships that you're establishing with your customers. That's what gets them back into the door. How are you thinking about that as that intersecting point?
It's not an ethereal exercise. Like, I don't think of brand love in a purist form. I think of it as it helps to facilitate consistent and predictable business growth. It's a great question that I don't think there is an exact answer for. I am a firm believer that looking at marketing and saying this is upper, middle, and lower is 1997. Marketing isn't a funnel, it's a subway map. If your television ad doesn't motivate the consumer to go to your website or call your 1-800 number or visit, then it's not an effective piece of creative, because it's not creating educated consideration in order to stimulate choice. If you don't recognize that consumers make an emotional decision before the rational choice, you're going to put so much of your energy into figuring out why your performance marketing isn't performing. Google page one is not going to win you your business. Google page one is like the last mile in a marathon. All of the work to get to that 25.2 point where the last mile, which is the hardest, is where you drive that consideration, where you drive that intellectual and emotional understanding, so that the rational choice of, in my case, searching for where should I take my car for an oil change, oh, there's a Take 5 down the street, I'm gonna go there. Why? Because I built the brand love story in other places.
Yeah, I think that's right, spot on. It's like, for us, it's we talk a lot about how are we getting to the right foresight, how are we getting to the right prediction, and I think that's that element of change that you're building into that, and that's helping to develop those relationships.
And AI allows you to have testing scenarios at really low cost. I mean, it allows you to not have to throw something against the wall and hope it sticks. You have the ability, if you can structure it well, to have test and controls, to get better. Marketers, the hardest word for a marketer to say is fail. Yeah. But some of our best failures lead to our greatest successes.
Absolutely. All right. I said we weren't going to talk about this one, but maybe I will just, with what you said about AI and testing that one, there's a natural tie into other conversation about synthetic data and how, and synthetic processes that are allowing for us to test its speed against artificial populations, artificial panels, those types of things. As you're thinking about that world and you're thinking about the humanity side of how you're building connections as a brand, how do you feel about that? Where does I'm going to be on the short end of the Zarkin stick for this.
I know we said we weren't going to talk about it, but I'll give you kind of a good analogy, okay? If you were to ask 100 people in a room who loves puppies, let's say 97 of them are going to raise their hand. If you were to then say to somebody, great, if you love them, you need to bring one home, your percentage is going to drop. If you can't be predictive in the world of elections, where you have probably more data and more data scientists, then I think you can't weed out the human nature of behavior by what a computer says. I mean, modeling to a degree tries to do that, but I've yet to meet a model that's 100% perfect, because the market conditions, the situation, there's never that replicatable moment in time. It gives you a leading indicator. It helps you figure out where you want to go, but it's certainly not going to tell you how to get there.
Right. It's has the same concerns that everything around the topic of AI that carries, in terms of just like, how are we avoiding bias? How are we making sure that we're steering?
If it's so good, then every agency should put 100% of their commission, their fees, into performance-based. Because if you have it to the point where you feel so confident that it can give you the results you want, then every person, every salesperson here selling media, every agency person should put 100% of their compensation up for grabs based on performance. If it works, you get paid. If it doesn't, you don't. I doubt there's a single person here that would feel comfortable doing that, which tells me that we want to believe, but it's not there yet. And that's okay. That's okay, but that's why people like me have a job, is because we have to figure out how to use all this shit and not drive ourselves crazy for this quest for absolute perfection versus just celebrating the progress along the way. If I am less shitty today than I was yesterday, that's positive. The goal in business is to continue to be less shitty. If you think about it, you know, you are, in baseball terms, in the Hall of Fame if 6 out of 10 times you go to home plate, you strike out. I don't think there's a marketer who still has a job whose batting average is 400. So that's a lot of pressure to put to swings at bat.
Pressure is a privilege.
It is a privilege, but it's also, with that privilege comes an awesome responsibility to understand the power of no, right, and the power of people. You know, profitability, if you work backwards, profitability begins with people, casting your team, both internally and externally. That allows you to build the process, to then measure the progress, to then get to profitability. If you focus 100% on profitability and don't think anything about people, you're not going to get there. Or if you are, it's going to be really ugly.
I'm just wondering how many of my agency friends are in the room that are all doing the math on your challenge for the 100% commission on some of those models. I have a feeling I'll also have a homework assignment for the team on that one pretty soon. So I think one of the, getting to a couple final questions, I'm just kind of curious on the personal side for you, clearly passionate about these topics. What inspired you to write a book, and continue just to push that into the industry?
It was definitely not to make money. I mean, if you've purchased my book, I want to thank you for the Starbucks that I make from it. When you work in multi-unit retail for as long as I have, and you work with franchising, you're in front of people a lot. Your job is not only to lead, but it's to train and teach. And I generally enjoy it. I've had the privilege of teaching at higher levels of institution. I'm really involved in mentorship programs. A franchisee said to me, like in my 3rd year, Doug, every time you come to our market and you deliver this presentation, you use the same analogies to explain stuff. And it's helpful to us because we know that you're not bullshitting because it's consistent. Have you ever thought about putting it down on paper? And I was like, yeah, maybe one day. I mean, I am the world's worst speller, and I have a love-hate relationship with autocorrect. If you've ever gotten an email from me, I apologize. But I had some time when I left Pearl Vision in the summer of 23 to write and kind of make that my full-time job for a while. And I had the name of my book, Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone, and the chapter titles in about 15 minutes. And then I would write for 5 to 7 hours a day. And, the ironic thing was the day the manuscript was due was the Tuesday after Labor Day weekend. And Saturday, I'm sitting at the pool with my kids, and I've got everything printed out. I'm doing one last read, and I'm reading the introduction to the book, and I'm like, God, this sucks. And then I read chapter 1. I'm like, this is really bad. And I got to chapter 2, and I turned to my wife, and I go, I'm going home. And she's like, why? I'm like, because first 3 chapters of my book are dog shit. And the reason why I came to that conclusion was because once I had the entire narrative, I realized that if the first few chapters of the book didn't set the premise for why you should read the book, then all was just going to be is stuff. And I spent 11 hours rewriting the first 3 chapters of the book. And I'm glad I did. But that crisis of confidence was new to me, because to do what we do for a living, you have to have that mixture of arrogance and humility. The arrogance to believe that you can get into the mind of the consumer and motivate them to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. Paired with the humility to realize that if you do not lead by listening, you truly will be tone deaf when it comes to your P&L.
I'm kind of curious, is there a sequel in the works?
No.
All right. So
maybe my pre and post ChatGPT emails, but no.
All right. So going back to that. So since there's not a sequel in the works, let's just imagine we're here in 5 years and we're thinking about humanity, brand love, AI. How are you thinking about it's going to have evolved? What do you think?
I think in the next 5 years, people will finally understand how to use AI for good, not for evil. I think people will become comfortable enough with the technology that it's understood that it's going to help with our efficiency and our effectiveness. I think, ironically, if you look at what's happening in the tech world, all these old school tech things like digital cameras and flip phones are coming back. And I actually think this push to AI is freaking a lot of people out, to the point where the power of the spoken word, my daughter's 17, she's coming home from her freshman year of college in about 3 hours, cannot talk on the phone, can text like a beast, but has no verbal skills on the telephone. How's school? Good. What's going on? Nothing. I mean, that's what I hear in my head, because they never learned how to talk on the phone. There was this story on the Today Show about landlines a couple months ago, and I love that. Like, I walked on campus with her. She happens to go to my alma mater, and I remembered the awesomeness of walking on campus and seeing somebody that you wanted to talk to and running across the street. They all walk on campus like this, and it's sad.
Might be the next topic of your third book could be just like the things that AI has taken away from your kids, and they're doing. I have a good one. My daughter, like a CD case. She looked at a CD case and she was just like, she couldn't figure out how to open it. I don't know. So, we can collaborate on that one, maybe.
No problem.
No,
no problem.
All right. But no, I think I take away from that really, is thinking human to being human. I think that's one thing we know is going to permeate as we go forward, is there'll always be the need for humanity.
How you lead is so much a part of what makes you special as a leader. The how, again, I talk about this in the book, the how to me is as important as the what. Transparency, being direct, honest feedback, real-time feedback. We've all gotten a performance review where they're like, you remember last February when you were in that meeting, you were really bad. Like, what am I going to do with that? Versus you give somebody a call after the meeting and be like, not your best day. Let me explain to you what I need. Or on the opposite, somebody sends an email giving a status report, and you send a note saying, you know what, great comprehensive recap, short to the point, but thorough, appreciate it. I really believe that the muscles of leadership are something that we're always trying to train. I mean, that's, for me, I always consider myself a leadership work in progress. Don't always have my best day, but try to have better days every day.
Always adapting for the future. So I guess with that, we're at the wire here. So thank you, Doug. You're clearly not short on a POV, and a wealth of knowledge in everything you've done, and just appreciate you sharing with everyone here today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Again, don't be intimidated by this tech. Embrace it. Realize that you don't know what you don't know, and ask for help. We live in a great community of marketers. Somebody may have an answer. Somebody may give you a factoid that helps you formulate your answer. As I said earlier, I don't believe there's a right way or a wrong way. There's just a way, and have fun finding your way.
Awesome.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it, everyone.
Appreciate it.